Mike here with Make It Great Again, and welcome to part 5 of the restoration and rebuild of my 2015 Argo 750 HDI 8x8 extreme terrain amphibious vehicle. I'm excited.
I can tell by the look in your eyes.
We're down to the parts. Let's get going. Part 5 of the video rebuild series is probably going to be one of my favorites. So I've got everything cleaned up, and we're going to begin reassembling everything. So if you're wondering where I got the parts from, bearings, flange gaskets, things like that, here you go. ArgoAdventure.com. You can download all of the manuals and everything else off their website for these machines, and again, order pretty much anything and everything for these machines if you need to. They don't sponsor me or give me free stuff. I'm pretty much on my own, but again, people ask, this is where I got them. This is where I get the parts from. Great people. I've dealt with them before on several of the other rebuilds that I've done, including Max 4s. You can also go to Richard's Relics. They also have parts for these amphibious machines. So let's go over the parts that I did buy real quick. So I've got 8 inner bearings. I've got 8 outer bearings, 2 of the jack shaft bearings. I've got 16 of these outer cork gaskets for the hubs. They were out of stock on the extension cork gaskets, so I'm going to have to buy some cork sheets of cork material and cut my own. I have a new fuel filter. I have some more fuel hose. I've got some brake pads. I've got these rivets for the body. I have a K&N air filter for the engine, a starter for the engine, and a new shifter boot. So they were out of stock on the chain sliders, so I'm gonna have to make do. I'm too short, but yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait to get all this stuff installed. Look at some key components and the differences in the bearings. So the inner bearing, jack shaft bearing, outer bearing. The HDI gets these big hefty bearings on the outside, right? Any other Argo model besides the HDI, the earlier models, the late 80s, 90s, and even early 2000, and some of the newer ones, these are the bearings you're going to be getting, outer bearing and inner bearing, right? The HDI bearing really stands out among them. And if we take a look at the bearings that I pulled out of the machine, the outer bearings, pretty much all the same. You can see how loose, just nasty these things were, so they're garbage. Same thing with the inner bearings. The that collar, a little bit loose. And on this particular one, I found this crack running 3/4 of the way around. For all I know, they're the original bearings, but they definitely needed to be replaced. When it comes to the chain tensioners, there's only one way that you can actually put them in, and you can see on the frame tabs and other things on how it would be set up. And it will also determine whether or not the chain tensioner is going to be on the towards the outside of the frame or to the inside of the frame. After the chain tensioners, I went ahead and installed the inner bearings with their flanges, and I did leave them loose, so they're all hand tight, so that I can make sure that these bearings aren't going to be pinched in there and misaligned. So when I slide the axle in, it'll line everything up, and then I tighten everything down. All right, so one quick note on the bearings and the flanges. I did pre-install them. So in order to make sure that, I'll show you on this one, see these little holes right here? That's where the grease is able to get pumped into the bearing itself, and you want it to line up with the greaser. Since these things are all loosely fitted, they can misalign, so I made a little mark right there so that I can line them up. To get the jack shaft out without pulling the transmission, you do loosen up these nuts here, and the bearing will actually like pivot. See how that bearing is pivoting in there to pull out your jack shaft and clear the transmission. So I just wanted to make that correction. I assumed that I wasn't able to get the jack shafts out without pulling the transmission, and that's just not the case. All right, I went ahead and mounted the transmission back onto the frame. tightened everything up. I've got new bearings, new chain, sprockets are all in good shape, but I'm still plagued with a loose chain on the front of this Argo. Now, I don't know if other 750 HDI owners have this issue. This is the correct number of links. I can't even remove a link to tighten it up. So the only thing that I could think of to do was to develop some type of a chain tensioning system for the front. As you guys already know, my first thoughts were to have this bracketry come over the top of the chain with a slider laying down, forcing it down with a spring, and the end result would have been with a spring. It would have contained it, but you know, it would have still been a little bit jumpy and problematic, especially if that chain or that spring popped off. So I came up with one final revision, which is a lock bolt design, as you see here, with the chain running over the top of the slider block, and it's much tighter, much simpler design, and easily accessible to work on and maintenance. And once I get it to the correct tension manually, I just simply lock it down and I'm good to go. I really think that this is going to work out beautifully. There's plenty of clearance, a lot of room, and it really took that slop out of the chain. Look at that. It's a beautiful design. I think it's going to work. So I've got the skid plate mounted, or at least the front and rear bolts. The side will come once I drop the frame in. I use 3/4 inch bolts, some fender washers, both inside and outside, with some nylon lock bolts. Same thing in here on the back. Now the skid plate on the back, if you look, skid plate wants to curl away. I think I'm going to go ahead and drill some additional holes in between. Well, that's definitely much better. And they're staggered evenly, and they're sealed properly. Now it's time to lift the frame into the tub. I love the contrasting colors too. The brown and the red, I think, was a good choice. So now there's going to be a little bit of fitment and alignment to start getting the axles and stuff in. So I went ahead and actually started at the rear of the Argo by bolting on the hitch here. Bolts through to the frame, and once that's tightened down, it ensures that the frame is actually pulled as far rear in the tub where it's supposed to sit. But in order to get that lined up, remember I told you that these frames don't quite sit on the floor of the plastic tub, right? So they're supposed to be, I mean, a little bit off. So there's no actual like metal contact, I guess, rubbing on the plastic or something. I don't know. But the frame does ever so slightly float in that tub, and it's held in place by all of these skid plate steel rivets that were originally here, which I'm now using steel bolts to hold that in place. Float that frame up, then we can get the axle extensions on each side lined up, bolted down. Now that everything is bolted up, everything's tightened down and secured, and that frame is properly suspended or floating inside the tub. Here, let me show you. So if you look, you can see the floor pan inside there. All right, I'm looking through to the bearing on the other side. There's that floor pan. You can see the light right there under it. So same with here, ever so slightly off the plastic. So that frame doesn't exactly quite sit down in the plastic. So getting that thing to lift, like I said, you're gonna shimmy that frame around and work those bolts in and get everything lined up, tightened down. Decided to go ahead and put the framework on while the paint dries. So let's get this framework back on. All right, so we have all the bolts holding the framework on. The frame is nice and sturdy and steady. The body is raised up. Thing of beauty. Got everything squared away. Nicely put. All right, so I went ahead and put the The rotor is back on. So these are your main steering rotors. These are your brake rotors for your handbrake. Before, these things were really wobbly and loose, so I went ahead and put a couple of shim washers behind it so that it tightened those up. Okay, so those are good to go. And of course, mystery solved again. Ever since we replaced the floor, the new flooring, the old one buckled up right here and was closing the distance, the space between the bottom of this rotor and the floor pan. So now, no touching, no rubbing, and it's definitely good to go. Let's get to mounting the axles. So I went ahead and laid everything out that I'm going to need. Got a bearing, got a bearing cup, and the outer hub. Now, again, for the extensions, you're going to need 3 of these gaskets. For these centers, you're only going to need 1 gasket. The reason for that, let me show you here. So you got a bearing cup. It's going to sit in there like so. Then you've got the outer hub. So that's actually going to be like this when it goes in. When it fits on there, you can see that there's a hell of a gap that you have to fill in right here. And that's where it takes 3 of those gaskets. If you look at the center where it sits in, all right, it only needs 1 gasket. So there you go. All right, let's get these axles put in. All the axles are in now. Beautiful. It's gorgeous looking. Everything nice and new, nice and tight, like a born-again virgin. Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, we're gonna get the chains in, and then I'm gonna start putting all the brakes and the calipers and everything on the transmission, getting all that set up. Got all the chains in now. Absolutely gorgeous. Everything's lined up perfectly. Beautiful. Everything is nice and tight. It's like brand newish. It's time to repopulate the transmission. Managed to basically dress up the Admiral transmission here with all of its goodies. I got the calipers on. I mounted the handlebars, the master cylinders, and I wanted to talk about the transmissions for a minute. So currently, Argo offers 2 different transmissions in their lineup. They offer a Classic and the Admiral transmission. The Classic transmission essentially is a modernized or reworked Gen 1 transmission that you would find in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000 machines. Then they came out with the Classic and then the Admiral. The Admiral transmission is a different animal from the Classic. So Argos are a skid steer machine. So in order to turn left, for instance, you apply the power by turning the handlebars to the right side master cylinder, which is connected to the left side brake, right? Left side controls left side in the Classic, right side controls right side on the Classic. On the Admiral, it's opposite. So the Admiral transmission, it's still skid steer, but it goes into a 1-to-3 ratio. So instead of braking the left side, it allows it to turn 1 full revolution, while this side turns 3 revolutions. So it doesn't drag the tires or stop that side from doing it, but it does it from the right side of the brakes. So when I apply the brake to turn left, this right brake is what stops or slows the left side. So in high gear, 1-to-3 ratio when turning left. This will turn 1 time, this will turn 3 times when turning left, and the same going right. In low gear, it not only stops the left side, but slightly has it turn left or turn backwards while this continues to spin forward in low range. So that's the main differences between the Classic and the Admiral transmission. It's why the Admiral is so smooth. I still have some more work to do on the engine and the upper shell. Get the gas tank back in, so I'm going to end part 5 here and pick back up on part 6 to get this thing back together again. We're nearly done. All right, guys, thanks for watching.